I'm Dawn Milne from Ivy's Public Affairs, and I'm pleased to be here with Pat MacDonald to discuss her research on learning from the enemy. Your research is on learning from the enemy. How can organizations learn from their enemies?
Well, it's interesting. It's how what they learn from their enemies is quite different than what they learn from their friends. And the use of the term enemy is it's deliberately provocative. But really what I'm getting at is organizations that are quite different from one another. And so it's through that difference that the opportunities for learning arise. And, of course, the opportunities for conflict.
Can you give me an example of an organization that learned from its enemy?
Well, the organization that I studied, the industry that I studied, is the BC salmon farming industry in BC, which has had conflict right from the beginning of the industry. But recently, there's been a marked change in the relationship, particularly between the largest salmon farming company and a coalition of environmentalists. And through their ability to work together on some field research, they have advanced the knowledge of marine biology and ways to protect the marine habitat.
What are some of the barriers to learning from your enemy?
Well, the barriers, I mentioned difference earlier, and the very difference that opens up the possibility for learning or provides the opportunity for real radical innovation. And that's one thing that research has shown, that radical innovation is more likely to come from organizations that are quite dissimilar from one another. But what hasn't been addressed is how they get over the tensions and the challenges that come from that very difference. And that's really what my research is looking at.
What can business leaders do to inspire such learning?
Well, there's a number of things that that leaders can do, and I think there are probably three main sort of topic areas, if you will, would be they can work on building the willingness and the ability of both their organizations and individuals to undertake this kind of learning. They can also really focus, once they've got sort of over through that hurdle, they can focus attention on knowledge gaps or data and the specific situation around the issues. And lastly, they need to be sensitive to how they structure the interface or how they structure the relationship with their enemies, if you will, or the different organizations, so they can maximize their sort of the opportunities over time.
What got you interested in this research?
Well, it came from my work with leadership teams. I have done a lot of work in helping groups develop strategic plans, develop business plans, and it was through that work that I got a real tangible sense of the impact that conflict has at the strategic level. And that's not been, I guess, well recognized, or has it been really considered before.
Why is such learning so important today?
Well, I think it's always been important, but I think today you have two aspects. As I mentioned earlier, there's the opportunity or the likelihood of radical innovation is much more likely to come from this working together or the connection from dissimilar organizations. And on the other hand, you've got the demands that society places on organizations are greater today, arguably, than they've been in the past. And there's an expectation that organizations will work with, collaborate, connect with a whole range of groups and organizations that they just aren't familiar with and that are quite dissimilar. And my research really speaks to how organizations can learn from those encounters. It's interesting. The Economist magazine a few years ago did a special survey. They do these special supplements where they were talking about multi-party initiatives and cross-sector initiatives. And they ended off the articles by saying, now the challenge is how do we make these sorts of initiatives work? And I guess that's what my research speaks directly to. How do you bring dissimilar organizations together and make it work? It's not about resolving their differences, as is often thought of, getting to some kind of harmony, but it's finding a way to connect across the differences and bridging across the conflict to advance their agendas despite the differences they may have.
Thank you very much, Pat.